I caught up with our friend Lake Lewis Jr. of SportsJourney.com on the adjustments we can expect the coaching staff to make ahead of Week 2 against the Broncos. And joining us now, Lake Lewis Jr., our Commanders, our NFL insider. Thanks so much for spending some time with us here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. First game of the season. They got a W.
Got it
done. Wasn't pretty, but it was a W.
That's exactly what I was going to say. So what can you just say about the fight we saw from this team? Because, of course, there were many places and many spots that head coach Ron Rivera is going to go back and make adjustments on, but they got it done at the end of the day. Well,
you know, Natalie, when you look at the way they came about, you know, we saw in the preseason, this was a team that battled and battled and battled, went 3-0, and that was, you know, Eric Bieniemy. You know, we talked about Eric Bieniemy being tough on these guys. Well, today's game is kind of like a testament to why he was being tough on them so they wouldn't quit. And I think for this team to show that they had that resiliency and they battled, they won their first game, and like I said, it's not pretty, but you heard Brian Robinson say it in the locker room, look, man, this is the NFL. Every game's tough. We got to take them as we get them.
When it comes to Sam Howell, I feel like he made leaps and strides in the preseason and training camp. Everyone is really just throwing their support behind him. What did you see from him today out on the field?
You know, he had an overall tough game. You know, the offensive line was giving up a lot of big plays. But I think there was one drive in particular where you saw everything that he could do. You know, he got knocked out right on the side over there, and he got up, he came back, so he showed toughness. Later in that drive, he had some plays where he improvised a little bit. He showed his playmaking ability. And how did he end that drive? He ran a touchdown, you know, so he showed that he can make plays with his legs as well. So I think when you see all those attributes, you see that he can be a special quarterback, but he's got to stand up upright, and that's where the offensive line comes in. And
when you kind of punch the numbers from today, the 6 sacks is something that stands out to a lot of people. Football fans and non-football fans, you look at that and you kind of, your eyes go wide a little bit. So there have been questions about this offensive line for as long as we can remember at this point. What was the biggest issue with them today?
You know, Arizona's guys were just coming. I mean, they were bringing a lot of pressure. They were bringing pressure around the edges, and Andrew Wiley, you know, and Leno, Charles Leno, they didn't have their best games. But at the end of the day, it's one game. One thing I always say about Eric Bieniemy, if you look at his days in Kansas City, maybe not last year because Kansas City's offensive line was great, but in those other years when they still went to the Super Bowl or went to the AFC Championship game, those offensive lines were kind of makeshift lines, but he made them play better. So it's one game. We've got to, you know, see how they do next week in Denver. But again, you pick up a win, and that makes everybody feel better to be able to be coached better.
Yeah, and lastly, the script was really flipped by the defense today. A lot of guys, Daron Payne, Montez Sweat coming up huge for this team. How big were their performances today in terms of being able to rewrite what this could have been a really just upsetting Week 1?
Well, I can say this right now. Montez Sweat may have written himself a check because the way he played today, you know, this is what you want to see from him. Obviously, Chase Young was out, so you needed to see those edge rushers produce. Montez Sweat had a hell of a game today. He really did. Daron Payne is Daron Payne. And then late in the game, John Allen had a big sack. So all those guys came together. And look, the defense is going to be the catalyst for this team. You know, how far they go depends on what these guys do. And I think for the most part, we saw the defense play well. Emmanuel Forbes pretty much shut down the whole side of the field most of the game, and at the end of the game almost had an interception to seal it, but still he had the big play to win the game for him.
Exactly. The defense is really going to move the offense. As we've heard it from the coaching staff, and we really saw it out here on the field in Week 1. Lake Lewis Jr., our NFL and Commanders insider, joining us tonight on 7 News Sports Sunday. Stay with us. So much more coming up after the